Hello, I'm Christopher Ryan. I'm a candidate in higher education administration at Stony Brook University. Thank you for coming to my presentation on Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. This presentation is the first of a three-part series on Kohlberg's theory of moral development for HEA 502, Survey of College Student Development Theory. Special thanks to Dr. Stephanie Foote for her leadership and support during this challenging time of a global pandemic. Wherever you are, I hope you're thriving, and I have faith we will all persist through this toward our goals and desired destinations. And with that, let's jump right in. Lawrence Kohlberg amassed over 20 years of longitudinal research in moral development, beginning in 1958 with a PhD dissertation at the University of Chicago. There were three major phases of thinking across this time in his 20 years of study, starting with cognitive developmental frameworks and social perspectives inspired by Piaget. But in the end, Kholberg deemed Piaget's work as dimensions, not as stages, which we'll get into a little bit more. The first line of thinking from the cognitive developmental structures and ideas evolved to a socio-moral perspective in the second stage of thinking to include three key stages: the intuitive, the concrete operational, and the formal operational. The final stage of thinking added nuance in moral orientation, moral decisions, and moral atmosphere, what Kholberg might have called sensitivities and ontogenetic ends toward universal applications. Today, we will discuss the foundations of Kholberg's theory of moral development. In part two of this series, we will discuss criticisms of Kholberg's work. In part three, we will discuss Kholberg's responses and influences on future research. The tensions between universalism and individualism, primarily the examination of groups and institutions, and how the environment stimulates the individual in development, is the essential inquiry in Kholberg's longitudinal work. And so, as a stage theorist, we have to ask the question, why is one stage better than the next? And according to a paper written in 1981, Kholberg writes, the core of each stage is an underlying concept of justice, and that each higher stage is better for resolving justice problems. Kholberg differed from Piaget in this sense of moving toward moral levels rather than cognitive dimensions prescribing moral reasoning. This is where the foundations were set on adding three levels, stages 4, 5, and 6, on top of Piaget's three cognitive dimensions. In the first phase of thinking, Kholberg was aiming to ascertain the differences among individuals at different stages according to categories like age. Early findings in research demonstrated invariant sequence, structured wholeness, and hierarchical integration. In his research, Kholberg emphasized value rather than fact, an effect on a person or persons, and a requirement that actions need to be taken. In assessing judgments, Kholberg determined exposure to higher stage thinking and cognitive conflict as the primary methods of stage growth in subjects. Due to time constraints today, I'm going to jump to Kholberg's greatest contribution and most up-to-date version of the theory, which is his second phase of thinking, the socio-moral perspective. In the theory of moral development, of course, there were some minor changes along the way, such as establishing soft versus hard stages and differences in research methods in the third phase, but the second stage is largely what is known today. There are 6 stages in total, with 2 stages at each level, and thus there are 3 levels. Each stage has terms of what is right, the reasons for doing right, and social perspective theory of the stage. Now, it's important to keep in mind that not every adult or every person will experience all 6 stages of moral development in Kholberg's theory. And first, we'll begin with the pre-conventional stages, which are stage 1 and 2. The pre-conventional person is marked by children under the age of 9. There are some exceptions here, but this is the majority of individuals in these stages. The pre-conventional person is all about rules and authority, and they can only consider their own perspective, not the needs and wants of others. Stage 1 is heteronomous morality, or abiding by law, where moral reasoning sees things in terms of physical harm, not psychological terms. It is about avoidance of breaking rules and punishment, and ultimately it's an egocentric point of view. Stage 2 advances these notions of individualism, instrumental purpose, and exchange to follow one's own immediate interests, and letting others do the same. Conflict resolution is relative and pragmatic here. And next we have the conventional stages, stages 3 and 4, where most adolescents and adults in our society are. The conventional person considers the perspectives of others, especially authority, and has internalized rules in terms of basic consequence structures. Stage 3 contains ideas of interpersonal expectations and relationships, conforming to social bonds such as parent and child dynamics and friends. Individuals in this stage assume role-taking responsibilities and what is meant to be good. This good progresses as the individual begins to see and care about what others think of them. So there is a little light in terms of moral development here at these stages. Stage 4 regards social systems and conscience. Fulfilling your actual duties to which you have agreed to is important here. Law and authority are still very much in play, but we are beginning to see a shift in moral reasoning. And next, we will discuss stages 5 and 6. This is the post-conventional level. And this is reached by a minority of adults. So again, everyone is not experiencing all 6 of these stages or reaching them in their lifetime. The post-conventional person understands and accepts society's rules, but has their own fundamental justice principles that precede society. The meaning behind this is their self-chosen principles dictate action and obligation, which are usually in line with society's rules, but if they are in conflict, self-principled action will be chosen. Stage 5 operationalizes social contract, utility, and individual rights specifically, where a greater affinity for fundamental justice thinking informs moral reasoning. Here, individuals understand everyone holds unique values while maintaining social relationships and duties, but the rational individual appeals to rights and values prior to social attachments and contracts. And finally, we have stage 6 in the post-conventional level, second level in post-conventional. And individuals here express universal ethical principles. Universal principles of justice are grounded in the belief that rational people have a personal sense of commitment for doing what is right. This is the very nature of where social arrangements derive. Kholberg explains that persons are ends in themselves and must be treated as such. In our next episode, we will discuss Rest's neo-Kholbergian theory of moral development and Carol Gillian's women's theory of moral development, and why Kholberg was biased against women. In the final episode, we will discuss the aspect scoring system, the intuitive issue system, and standard issue scoring methodologies and research that validated Kholberg's 20+ years of longitudinal study and research. Thank you again for joining me today. I'm Christopher Ryan, MA candidate in Higher Education Administration. We'll see you next time.